is good to be with you this morning. And happy Mother's Day. It is good that our country has decided that we should take a day and set it aside to honor mothers. But, brethren, Christians, I pray that we understand the blessing of mothers. And not just one day, but maybe 3, even 4 at the top. 4 days. No. Every day, always thankful and honoring that blessing of God we have in mothers. Because, brethren, remember this and never forget, in the garden, when man's fate was sealed and sudden violent death and the end of our kind should have resulted, God offered forgiveness. God offered salvation through a mother. And years later, when our Savior came into this world, and God, brethren, wrap your mind around it, God was born of a mother. And setting Adam aside, all of mankind can share that reality. We were all born of a woman. What about Eve? Well, it's kind of weird because maybe Adam was kind of the mom because of the... but no. But all can relate to that, mothers. So this morning, I want to talk about mothers. We have a very limited time, unfortunately, so I just kind of want to put a portrait up there of what I think of when I think of mothers, and specifically godly mothers. I want to talk about their focus. I want to talk about their fierceness. And I want to talk about the favor that we all enjoy from godly mothers. And then I want to spend a little time at the end talking about the future. To begin, the focus of godly mothers. Well, the hint's kind of in the adjective there. It's God. Because a godly mother understands that a child is a gift from God. And a godly mother understands that into her hands this blessing has been given. And that she has a responsibility that coincides with her desire to raise this child, that the child may know this God who has given him or her to the mother. And she has a desire to return that child to God because He's the giver. And we know, got to put that spin on it, if not, there will be questions asked. Where is the child I gave to you? Godly mothers understand that, and their focus, therefore, is on God. Some examples. Obviously, we talk about Hannah, and notice the similarity in these situations. And I pray that as I talk about just a couple examples, it opens your mind to think of so many others. We could talk about Sarai. We could talk about Rachel. We could talk about Rebecca. But Hannah. Hannah was married to a man that had 2 wives. And even though Hannah was his favored wife, again, problems, recipe for disaster, she did not have any children because the text tells us that God had closed her womb. But the other wife had many children. So every year when they went up to Shiloh to offer the sacrifices, they would offer the sacrifices for themselves and for that other wife and all of her children. And it says that that was always a time of great sadness for Hannah, because apparently that was a time that really emphasized the fact that she had no children. And it says that this great sacrifice, which was probably a feast, she would not eat during that time. So this feast became a fast. Then what happened? Well, there's a side note here. Husbands, don't be like her husband. He noticed his wife was unhappy because she didn't have any children. And so what did he say? Oh, honey, surely I am enough. Don't do that. That didn't help. Actually, the next thing we see is she herself has gone to Shiloh, and she's outside the tabernacle, and she is praying so fervently to God for a child that the priest Eli noticed it. He thought she was drunk. She was praying so vehemently. You remember what she prayed? She prayed that God would give her a son. And she said that if he would do that, she would give that child back to him for his whole life, and that no razor would ever touch this child's head. Maybe a reference to that Nazirite vow. And God gave her that child. Imagine, you've wanted a child for so long, and finally here it is, you have this child. And the text says she refused to go to the yearly feast because she said, I will not go again until he is weaned. Because the next time she goes, she's going to give her son forever to the priest in the service of God. Now, a lot of ink has been spilled on what does it mean to be weaned and when was that age. And you will hear 2, and you will hear 3 years old. You will hear 7. I heard as high as 12 and 13. When? I don't know. I lean between the 3 and the 7. I don't go to the 12. But picture this again, especially you mothers. This child, and let's say 3. This child that you've waited for so long, here it is, and you've had this child for 3 years in that special nurturing relationship, and now you have to go and complete your vow and take your baby and give it to a stranger. And it says that every year she gave that child a new robe as he was growing. Can you imagine seeing him every year? What was her focus, church? Her focus was on God. She had asked of God, God had delivered, and she honored that vow. Service to God. And brethren, God respects that, and God rewards faithfulness. I can think of 2 books in the Bible named after that son, can't you? And the text goes on to tell us that she also, God blessed her, she had 3 other sons and 2 daughters. What was her focus? Amazingly, on serving God. Let's talk about another lady named Mary. Mary was a poor country girl, very young, maybe 14, 15 years old. Some think maybe even younger. And what's the occasion? Well, she's betrothed. We would say she's engaged to be married, and there's usually a longer period than maybe nowadays. And an angel appears to her and says that she is blessed of the Lord, and that she is going to become with child, and that child shall be called Jesus, Jehovah saves. This child is going to be called the Son of God. And what did she say? I don't understand how this can be. I am married, but I haven't had the formal marriage ceremony yet, and I've never been with a man. And he said, the Holy Spirit will come upon you, and you will be with this child. It will be a son of God. Brethren, do you understand what this entailed for her? For this young lady to suddenly become with child who hasn't been formally married yet, though she's engaged. You understand it meant her death if he pursued it? It's adultery. She could have been stoned to death. She could have been simply put away and shamed publicly for the rest of her life, labeled a harlot. This is what the angel says is going to come upon her. And what does she say? Behold, the maidservant of the Lord, let it be as you say. What's her focus? Her focus is on God. On your own time, I want you to look at 1 Samuel 2, 1 through 10 and compare it with Mary's song of Luke chapter 1, 46 through 55. These 2 women separated by so many years, over 1,000 years. They sang the same song of thanksgiving. And it was a song of God who humbles the proud, but exalts the humble, who is faithful and rewards those who and cares for those who are with him, but punishes the wickedness. Both these mothers willing to give their children up despite what it was going to cost them. And Mary, turn to Luke, please. Chapter 2. Jesus is born. And what happens? All these shepherds show up. So what does Mary know? Mary knows that this child that she is being given, she knows that this child is going to be special. Jehovah saves, the Son of God. But what does that mean? When the child is born, all these shepherds come and visit. And they say all these things. And look at verse 19. But Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. Then when Jesus was old enough to take for the ceremony and the offering for opening the womb, he goes to Jerusalem, and we see this man Simeon come. And Simeon praises God when he sees Jesus, because he says, now I've finally seen the consolation of the Lord. Verse 29, Lord, now you are letting your servant depart in peace according to your word, for my eyes have seen your salvation, which you have prepared before the face of all peoples, a light to bring revelation to the Gentiles and the glory of your people Israel. He's talking about her baby. What does he go on to say to her? Verse 33, and Joseph and his mother marveled at those things which were spoken of him. Then Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, behold, this child is destined for the fall and rising of many in Israel, and for a sign which will be spoken against. Yes, a sword will pierce through your own soul also, that the thoughts of many hearts may be revealed. And then Anna made her statement. And then the next thing we see in verse 41, Jesus is 12 years old and preparing himself to become a son of the commandments. And he goes forward, and all are amazed at this. And again, look what it says down in verse 51. Then Jesus went down with them and came to Nazareth, was subject to them, but his mother kept all these things in her heart. She knows he was a special gift from God. Joseph does too. But now, what does this mean that he's going to be the Savior of his people? What does it mean that he's going to be the Son of God? What did Simeon mean when he said a sword would pierce her heart as well? What is this going to mean? You realize, think what it would have meant to be standing at the foot of the cross, and that's your boy on that cross, beaten to the point of almost not being able to recognize him. And there he is, your boy, given to you of God, and here it is. This is what it means. And what's his only thought, church? John, this is your mother. Mother, this is now your son. What was her focus? More on her in a little bit. Because it's not easy having this godly focus, especially in this ungodly world within which we live. There's another mother who didn't have a child, the wife of Manoah. And she was promised that she was going to have a special child and that he was going to be a Nazirite from birth, maybe like Samuel. His name was going to be Samson. And they joyed about that. And what's the first thing we read, the next chapter? And Samson saw this Philistine woman, and he loved her. And he came back and he told his mom and his daddy. And then what did his mama and daddy say? What did his mama say? Son, what are you doing? You're a Nazirite of the Lord. You're a special child given to me of the Lord. You can't go do this. And the text says she didn't know that God was using him to work his will. And then at the end in chapter 16, brethren, think of all that we know about Samson. He was going to be a deliverer of Israel, but oh my, do you think he was trouble for his mama? Oh my. And then in chapter 16, He fulfills his role and he delivers Israel in his death. And it says that his father's family came and took that boy home and buried him with his father. You think his mama wasn't there? I can't prove it, but I bet she was there. It's not all easy being a godly mother. But oh, the focus on God and what really, really matters. What about the fierceness? We could talk about women in general, mothers in specific. Maybe not what you first think of when you think of mothers, fierceness. But it ought to be. I grew up on the mean streets of Belleville, Michigan, a little bedroom community outside the city of Detroit. And I grew up on those mean streets where BB guns and bows and arrows and sticks and rocks were our toys that we played with all the time running in the streets. And nothing scared us save his mama is coming. Then we would scatter. Why? Well, ask my children about my darling, beautiful, sweet wife when Mama Bear gets involved. Right? There's a fierceness there from that love and that devotion that mothers have. And it results in that fierceness. I want to talk about three women, again, because of time. I want to talk about Jael, Rizpah, and an unnamed Canaanite woman. Jael, I have no proof that she was even a mother. All I know is that Deborah, in her song, Deborah refers to herself as a mother of Israel and refers to Jael as being blessed of those who are in tents. And I don't know. I know she was married to Heber the Kenite. That's all I know. But I do know this. King Jabin of Canaan was persecuting Israel for 20 years, terribly. And that there was a problem with male leadership in Israel at this time. Deborah is the prophet that stands up. And she calls Barak to her that he is to go out and fight for the Lord against King Jabin and his great commander Sisera. And you remember Deborah even said, after Barak's less than brave statement that he refused to go up to battle unless she would go with him, she said, I'll go with you, but the ultimate victory is going to be given to a woman, not to you. God is with Israel, and they crush the forces of Sisera. But Sisera escapes the battlefield, and he goes to a tent to a nearby Heber. Heber was a friend to the Canaanites, but not so Jael. He came into the tent with Jael, and he said, give me some water. And she gave him some nice, warm milk. And she put him under some blankets so that he is now nice and warm and comfortable, and he went to sleep. And she went over and grabbed her hammer and grabbed her tent stake and drove it through his temple into the ground. All those mothers of Israel who'd been persecuted. Do you remember Deborah's song? Deborah's song ends with them saying, can you picture Sisera's mama? Saying, where's my boy? Oh, he's probably out getting spoils from his conquering. No, Jael, blessed of those who dwell in tents, has taken care of that. Beware, brethren. How about Rizpah? Rizpah is a bittersweet story. We talked about this when we talked about Mephibosheth in our Sunday night lessons. You remember that King David showed honor to Mephibosheth because he was the son of Jonathan. And we talked about the fact that there was a famine for 3 years in Israel. And David approached the Lord and said, what's behind this famine? And that the cause of the famine was the way Saul had treated the Gibeonites in a bloodthirsty manner. So David approached the Gibeonites and he asked them, what is the recompense you demand? Your satisfaction. And they asked for 7 sons of Saul. And you remember, David spared Mephibosheth the son of Jonathan, but gave them 2 sons of a woman named Rizpah. One of them was named Mephibosheth. So you're thinking, my goodness. So Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan's uncle's name was Mephibosheth? What is with these people? The other son of Rizpah was Armani. I don't know if he's the guy that made the suits, but Armani. 2 of her sons and 5 sons, look at this, son of Michal, who was married to David for a little while, you remember? More on that maybe in another study. But those 7 boys were given to the Canaanites, given to the Gibeonites, who were Canaanites, but we won't get into that now. Given to the Gibeonites, and the Gibeonites hanged them. Sorry, I never get that right. And they were just going to leave the bodies hanging there, exposed to the elements and the animals. But Rizpah, the mother of Armani and Mephibosheth, came and spread out sackcloth at the foot of their bodies. And she stayed there a whole season, making sure that no birds of the air or animals got to her sons. Can you imagine, brethren? Can you imagine being that woman with your son there for month after month? David finally heard about it, and he went and took the bodies down and gave them a proper burial. She shamed him into action. That's a mama, Rizpah. What about the Canaanite woman, unnamed in Matthew 15? Jesus was up in Tyre and Sidon, and he's preaching to the Jews, and this Canaanite woman has a daughter who's demon-possessed. She hears about Jesus, and she goes to him. And she says, please, help my daughter. What does Jesus do, church? He ignores her. She pleads again, please, help my daughter. What does Jesus do? Daughter, I have not come here for you. I have come here for the children of Israel. What does she do? Please, help my daughter. Jesus says, it's not fitting to give that which is for the children to the dogs. Called her like a little puppy. Maybe not a huge insult, but I've been called better. What did she do? Ignored, rebuked, kind of insulted? What did she do? She said, but the little dogs catch the crumbs that fall from the children's table. And Jesus healed her. The fierceness of that mother. All she knew was her daughter's need, and she was not going to be denied. And that's a mama, in it to win it. And we can expand it. Mother's Day, and I don't know if there's actually a Grandmother's Day, but you understand grandmothers are mothers. That's how it works. I will never forget talking with my grandma one time about a situation, a delicate family situation. And my grandma heard what I told her and got up saying, I'm going to go call your father and put an end to this right now. And I was horrified. Please, Grandma, don't. I beg of you, please don't. And to this day, brethren, you want to see me in an alley fighting against a huge group of ninjas, I want my Grandma Lois at my back because she's going to get it done. Okay? The fierceness of mothers, that love, that devotion.